and welcome to Domain 1 for your CCS exam prep course. Domain number 1 focuses on diagnosis coding. On the day of the exam, AHEMA expects that you can perform 2 tasks. Let's talk about those tasks. First, given a scenario, they want you to review the medical record documentation and accurately assign the code. Second, they want you to apply ICD-10-CM convention and guidelines to accurately code to the highest level of specificity. So let's talk about how we're going to get you to the point where you're able to tackle these 2 tasks with ease. So first, there are 3 resources that you will want to have during our Domain number 1 review. First, you'll want to have your ICD-10-CM codebook. It doesn't matter which publisher you have. Find the publisher that either A, you have access to, but B, is one that you are familiar with. It is very important that you review the AHEMA website to identify which version, which year will be needed on the day that you take your exam. The second is the ICD-10-CM Coding Concepts, a review guide. This review guide was provided to you when you registered for our course. And last, and certainly not least, because this exam is administered by AHEMA, we recommend that you do purchase a copy of their exam prep book. While we will have scenarios embedded into our program, we believe that the combination of our review materials and then the AHEMA review guide will set you up for success. So I'm often asked, should I or should I not tab my coding manuals? It's really up to you. It's a matter of personal preference. Here's a picture that I grabbed from Etsy that identifies how one may tab their manual. Again, up to you. If you want to know more about tabbing your CPT manual, I recommend that you check out the YouTube and other resources that are available on the World Wide Web. All right, so the first thing that you are going to hear me say about coding, and the last thing that you're going to hear me say about coding, is guidelines, guidelines, guidelines. Guidelines are not only critical to you being able to pass the CCSP exam, but also for purposes of day-to-day coding. So as it relates to the CCSP exam, there are 2 sections of the ICD-10-CM manual that you'll want to be familiar with. First, that's section 1A, B, and C, which focuses on conventions, general coding guidelines, and then chapter-specific guidelines. The chapter-specific guidelines are pretty long, so I definitely recommend that you don't delay and start to review and understand them today. Now, notice I said review and understand. Why is that so important? Well, you can review something, but if you don't understand it, how will you be able to apply them on the day of your CCSP exam? Now, remember one of the resources that I mentioned, ICD-10-CM Coding Concepts, the one that we mailed to you? That's a great book to use to review the guidelines. And then we have section 4. Section 4 focuses on guidelines for outpatient services. So, what's your first homework assignment? Your first homework assignment is to crack open the ICD-10 CM Coding Concepts book. That's that blue and gold book that we sent to you via mail, and review it and go through each and every question. All right, so now let's talk about something else that's very important. Remember that ICD-10 CM code book that I spoke of? Let's review how that book is set up. So ICD-10 CM is broken into an alphabetical index and then a tabular list. The alphabetical index is divided into 4 parts. The first part is the alphabetical index to diseases. The second part is the neoplasm table. The third is your table of drugs. And last, but certainly not least, the external cause index. Fun fact, per ICD-10 CM guidelines, external cause codes cannot be used in the first position. You are going to hear me say guidelines, guidelines, guidelines so much that you're going to be walking around singing it. Guidelines, guidelines, guidelines. So that was the alphabetical index. The second part is the tabular list. The tabular list consists of 22 chapters. Another fun fact. Remember I talked about the guidelines, section 1C, the chapter-specific guidelines? Well, the chapter-specific guidelines provide you with the rules of the road, if you will, related to these chapters. Now, you are probably going to say, that seems like a lot. You have to decide during this journey how much time you're going to dedicate to going through each of these areas. If I were you, I would take the time to plot out a schedule. The way that our course is set up, in order to move out of domain number 1 over into domain number 2, you have to finish all of the activities. The ICD-10 CM Coding Concepts book probably will take you about 16 hours to complete. You have been provided with an answer key. That answer key is designed for you to check your knowledge. It's okay if you get something wrong because no one is perfect. On a HEMA CCSP exam, you don't have to get 100% to pass. Keep that in mind and give yourself some grace as you go through this journey. All right, so the last thing that I want to end on is the process of locating codes. One of the things that I have found over the course of my 30-year history in healthcare is that some people forget the correct way to use their ICD-10 CM manual. So in the front of your manual, generally there's like the basic steps of coding. In one version that I have, they list 10 steps. I challenge you to spend some time looking at your code book and locate all the different tips, tricks that are in your manual. On the day of the exam is not the time for you to figure out, oh my gosh, I don't understand this particular area. Now is the time, okay? So, the coding process, and this is the abbreviated version, is going to begin with you reviewing your medical record documentation and capturing the conditions that are codable based on, you know I'm going to say it, guidelines. Once you identify the conditions that you want to code, the next step is for you to select your main term in the alphabetical index. Of note, the main term should not be a body part. Why? A body part isn't a condition. So your main term should really be that active process, that condition that your patient has. Once you locate your main term, the next part is your subterm. In the ICD-10 CM Code Manual, you'll notice in the alphabetical index that there are two very faint gray lines. One gray line, the first gray line, is to help you identify your subterms. The second gray line is really designed to help you understand that your main term has a subterm, but then the subterm may have areas underneath there that you will need to review. Why? So that you can code to the highest level of specificity. Remember, that was one of the tasks that AHIMA wanted you to be able to perform. After that, you're going to be given a code in the index. So you're in the alphabetical index, it gives you a code. You're going to take that code over into the tabular list. You want to be led and guided by the notes that are in your alphabetical index as well as your tabular list. One of the things that I have found that is a challenge for new coders is time. And when you're in the tabular list and you're looking at your code, make it a habit to read from where your code begins to where your code ends. Additionally, you will want to ensure that you go back to the beginning of the 3-digit category, as there may be notes that you will want to use for coding purposes. And oftentimes, those notes are not at the code level that you're looking at. They have been placed at the beginning of that code category or the beginning of the tabular list, and you'll miss them if you don't go and check those areas. So let's talk about next steps. Number one, you must do all of the exercises in the ICD-10 CM coding concepts. Once you complete that entire booklet, again, generally speaking, 8 to 16 hours of time, and I mean like sitting down all at one time, okay? After you finish that, you check your answers. The next step is you'll be back to see me for practice, coding practice. I'm going to walk you through scenarios, and you're going to identify the correct code. I'm going to give you a heads up. These scenarios are going to be based on, and you guessed it, and this is my last word for domain number 1, guidelines. I'll see you real soon.